Hi everyone, I'm Sari here.
Hi, my name is Manabu Takatani.
Hello, everyone. My name is Denny Putra.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathleen.
Hello, my name is Renz.
Hi everyone, my name is Gwen Alcandino, and thank you again for coming to see this week's ARC Challenge.
So for the ARC challenge of this week, we need to watch the Claudia Kishi Club on Netflix and then give our reviews.
First, I'm going to be watching the trailer and then the movie. So here's my reaction to the trailer.
So actually, I was the one recommending that we watch the Claudia Kishi Club for this week's challenge because I saw on Angry Asian Man Facebook page that they were featuring this documentary. So I was intrigued and I watched the trailer. And there was one sentence that they said about how Claudia Kishi was shattering the model minority myth, and that got me really interested. I also did not grow up with the Babysitters Club, so I was really interested in knowing more about this series and who Claudia Kishi is in the story.
My initial impressions were that this was going to be about an Asian American female who breaks the social norms and is a trailblazer, and I think I enjoy watching it.
Alright, so I just got done watching the trailer for the Claudia Kishi Club, and I must admit that I'm going into this with like no pre-existing knowledge of the Babysitters Club, unfortunately. But so far, well, it seems to me like Claudia Kishi is an incredibly inspirational character. So I think my primary expectation for this movie is to learn a lot about her from the lens of her what appear to be her biggest fans, and I think I expect this to be an emotional viewing because she seems like a character that so many people can resonate with.
I'm not quite sure I knew about the characters. I think because maybe I grew up, even though I grew up in the 80s and 90s, but then I came from Indonesia and I may not know Claudia Kishi before as a character. But then just noticing from what the people in the movies, in the trailer, mentioned or said about Claudia Kishi and how excited they are to tell things about her. I'm kind of excited to know what is going on with the movie, what specifically with the character. And some of the words that I pick up from the trailer, they're kind of interesting to me. It's one of the people in the movie mentioned that Claudia Kishi is someone who is unapologetic about being who she is, and then she is a very pursuing his own path. So it's kind of I I I just have a feelings that in the movie that I want to hear more about the character. I think it's she's very wild. She is a very spontaneous. Um, she just choose to be who she wants to be. But I think in some sense, I also expected that there are going to be some interpersonal conflict. There's going to be some unexpected things going on with her in her life, and then also I think there's also some probably some feeling of loneliness or rejection in that sense.
Watching the trailer, my expectations are pretty low right now. I've never really read or know anything about the Babysitters Club. I didn't grow up on that, so I'm not really sure what to expect. It's only 17 minutes, so I'm thinking it's not going to be too intense. I'm hoping that I really enjoy it though.
From watching the trailer, I'm looking forward to learn more about Claudia and her story and the story behind how people relate to Claudia. And I think I'm from the movie or from the trailer. I think I'm going to be inspired, inspired to be able to share more about my own story and to think more critically about how I share that story itself and how I live into my identity as a Japanese American.
My thoughts on the film were that I love watching it. I really love the interviewees' energy and how they relayed the significance of Claudia Kishi to them.
I love the feel of it. The feel of the movie is very of that time period, if that makes sense. It wasn't that long ago, but You don't really see a lot of that nowadays, like the paper moving and the drawing and the write. I love the way that that was made. And the soundtrack. Yeah, the soundtrack was just really good. I feel like it kind of captured everything that needed to be.
Right off the bat, I feel really happy having watched it. It was really great to see those who grew up in the 90s being represented and share their experience of growing up with Claudia Kishi and her stories in the Babysitters Club. As a child of the 90s myself, I really identified with those who said that they didn't really see a lot of Asian American characters on TV or read about their characters in the books that they read growing up.
It turns out that these characters are very influential, especially for a Asian American um, teenager at the time.
I feel really, really intrigued, really curious about who this person was that could kind of make you feel this kind of way. It made me feel like I could relate to this person as well, and it made me really sad in certain parts. It's kind of bringing forward a lot of thoughts that I never would have figured out had I not watched this.
I honestly wasn't expecting to feel excited to watch a show based on a teen girl and her friends, but I honestly feel like I would enjoy it.
It's very surprising to me that her characters, Claudia Kishi, is someone that most of the, at least the Asian American people in the movies talks about. They want to identify themselves with Claudia.
When I thought that it was a documentary, I thought they were going to maybe talk a little bit more about, I guess, specifics in the Babysitters Club. I did not expect this documentary to make me feel so many things in such a short amount of time, address so many things in such a short amount of time, and just overall have that look and feel.
Going into this movie, I didn't really know that much about Claudia Kishi or her story in the Babysitters Club, so it was really good to see some of the background stories, such as hearing about her role in starting the business. It was really refreshing and fun to see the different alternative titles for the Babysitters Club book. That was really funny and something that I didn't expect.
I just thought it was really cool how one of the people being interviewed, the books were such a large part of her childhood, and then she went on to eventually work on the Babysitters Club series that's on Netflix now. So that's really awesome.
It was a little bit different from my expectation in a good way. I thought I would learn more about who Claudia Kishi was and how she shattered the model minority myth, which I did learn about that. But what I ended up taking in more was the impact of characters like Claudia Kishi to the Asian American creatives that were featured in the documentary. So people like C.B. Lee, Su Ding, Gil Galligan, and Phil Yu.
I really identified with those people in the movie who said that they saw Asian Americans represented in the TV through Power Rangers and in the Captain Planet TV show. I really remember that too fondly, so it was a really great time walking down memory lane alongside those in the documentary.
So I think the film was approximately what I expected it to be. It was definitely very emotional.
Something that was expected, again, as I mentioned before when I talked about the trailer, it turns out that Claudia is a teenager who is very spontaneous about herself, that she is really different from like her siblings in the family. She wants to be more artistic. She is, I think, very alive. I kind of expected also like there's some conflicts. She experienced what some of the people in the movie talk about, like racism. You know, she's being rejected by some of the like white family, and also her friends at school, where she is the only Asian American in her school.
But something that I did expect and I guess was evident in the movie was about the idea, as I mentioned, the lack of Asian American representation in media and the idea of the model minority idea and the idea of being othered. Even in 2020, I had the experience of someone who I know and who knows me as an American telling me to go back to Japan. So even in 2020, our society is still has that issue of racism and othering of Asian Americans, which is unfortunate. But I think it's important to have those kind of books and characters such as Claudia to share and dispel the idea of being othered and the racialized version idea of being Asian American.
You know, that they made this analogy at the end about how we always get the crumbs of the cookie, never the full cookie, and that always made me like that made me feel very intrigued because I never really thought about how little we were represented until until it was brought to my attention, and that's maybe just because I've always been the minority.
It was impactful to hear one of the guests in the documentary mention that the lack of representation makes you feel that you are in the world without you in it. So the lack of representation may cause Asian Americans and Asian communities to feel that they have to fit the mold of stereotypes imposed upon us. And in the end, the lack of representation erases our diversity, erases our unique experiences and histories.
I think a question that I am left with after the film is, had Claudia Kishi's character not been written, or if she were different, or had these individuals not had a role model that they could look to in the media, someone they could identify with as Asian Americans, would they have went ahead with forging their own paths?
Claudia Kishi was very much unapologetic about who she was and how she represented herself always. And I think that's something that I've always struggled to do. Like, I knew that I was always not the stereotypical Asian, even though I can fall into the stereotype at times. Like, I think one of the people, she was reading from the book, and Claudia said that, you know, her parents would never admit it, but she kind of feels like a big disappointment to her parents because she wasn't like, you know, the model Asian. It's kind of something that they're like a standard they're kind of held to, so they feel like they have to act like that. And it's really it made me really sad to hear all of these people say that they related to that feeling of you know, kind of being the disappointment to their parents, even if they would never admit it.
Each of the individuals interviewed in the film express how they can identify with and resonate with Claudia Kishi's character and the challenges that she faces as an Asian American teenager in the 80s and 90s, I believe it was.
Her experience, her life experience, kind of reflecting on what most of the Asian American community or like teenager at the time feel about themselves. And I think Claudia is some sort of like someone who they want it to be, but they cannot be in a real life. So it's more like projecting someone who's projecting herself or himself in that character, and that character just in the book just tell a lot of like real life experience of what Asian American again like experience in their real life.
Yeah, Claudia Kishi, I feel like, was the epitome of everything I kind of wanted to be when I was younger. She wasn't afraid to be who she was. And the idea of how everyone relates to that because everyone is so afraid to be who they are is really an interesting thing to think about.
I would like to recommend the movie to not just Asian American community, but I think also like people in this like country or people from not from United States like me, international students. I think the character kind of represent what happened, a social dynamic that happened in the U.S. and what truly happened in the social interaction for specifically like again like Asian American individual in the U.S.
I would definitely recommend it to my little cousins because I think the show gives them strong female role models, and to anyone who enjoys things such as the Nancy Drew series.
Definitely recommend this to people who are very curious and just enjoy a nice feel-good film. To my Asians and Asian American community out there, I definitely recommend this to you, especially if you feel like you would relate to a Claudia Kishi type person.
I think I would recommend this film to everyone, honestly. I think it highlights the importance of representation in the media.
I would recommend this movie to those who don't identify as Asian or Asian Americans to have a chance to step into the shoes of those who do identify as Asian Americans. But also would recommend my fellow Asian American brothers and sisters to watch the movie and to be encouraged by those in the movie to be yourself and pursue your passions in whatever field and areas that you're interested in.
I'm hoping that this documentary will inspire many Asian and Asian American communities to do what was mentioned, to bake your own cookies and to share them with others. And I really am hoping that Purdue Asian American and Asian Resource and Cultural Center, or Purdue ARC, can be that encouraging space for us to learn and understand and share our expertise, our voices, our histories and experiences so that eventually we will shatter that model minority myth.
So thank you again for seeing our art challenge this week. I really hope you enjoyed hearing all of our thoughts on it, hearing maybe a little bit about our experiences growing up or why we related to this movie and or documentary so much.
Something I really appreciated about the movie was the quote about how we can tell our own stories. We can be the main characters of our stories, and we can bake our own cookies. So we can even build our own bakeries. So we can share our stories of being Asian American and be passionate and be very proud of our identities, whatever that may be.
Hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on the Claudia Kishi Club. Take care.
Ow! Yeah, goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Goodbye.